I have returned to talk about astral projection. And I want to recount my very first time intentionally projecting. I'd had out-of-body experiences before, but never intentionally out until I think it was 2015, I want to say, when I got super interested in this sort of thing and began to practice. I eventually achieved a intentional out-of-body experience while I was laying on my bed wide awake. I was face down. I was not tired. I was sort of resting and in a state of what I would call peace, meaning there was no external anxieties working on me at the moment. And I was trusting in my environment, so there was not chaos around me, which those two things can be hard to achieve. And I decided, you know what, I'll try. Why not? And so instead of overthinking things, which is one thing that a lot of people who are trying this sort of thing trip themselves up with, I just sort of relaxed, set my focus, and kind of let myself drift off into that state where I was able to enter a transitional phase where I felt my legs float up towards the light in my room. And I literally believed, since I had never done it intentionally before, I literally believed that I was being levitated off of my bed. But because I was relaxed and in a good state, I didn't panic or anything like that. And I felt good about it. Some experiences you feel anxious about, or you feel a sudden blockage of fear, like a sudden realization that you're going to go out of body, and there's a worry to it, an anxiety to it. Not this time. No, I came out very naturally, floating above my bed, weightless, and then I simply stood up and rested on the floor after being essentially carried up. And as I looked up into the ceiling where the light was, I could still see a light there because the room was very similar, but a little bit more empty. The bed wasn't there anymore. It was like on its side, if I remember correctly, against the wall. It's kind of weird. As if you're entering some sort of weird, strange, I think they call it high strangeness, where things just aren't what they seem to be. And this is very common when you are entering a plane of existence which is very close to your mind and not very close to the literal world, because things will change. If you enter a place where you're in the physical world and you're seeing physical things, it'll be very exact and detailed, and the world will match what it is in reality, except that you can see, spirits and this sort of thing, and energy and that sort of thing. But in this case, I was in a different, a more internal world, closer to the mind, but not in the mind. I was definitely out of body, but not close to the world, I guess is the way to put it. These things are very hard to talk about because it's hard to explain the layers to people. And the truth is, there's an irrationality that I've talked about many times, which makes it so that there's no definitive you never know what something will be as you go closer towards this irrationality. If you're closer to the objective world, you can know what things are. But anyways, I digress. And I walked around the room and I tried to open a portal, and it was sort of shaky and oval and a bronze color, or brass, and I saw force through it, but it wasn't stable enough for me to go through, so I didn't go through the portal. I stayed in my room and kind of looked around, and then I think I forgot to mention, when I looked up at the light that was in my room, I got distracted. I saw energy flowing out of it, white light, this is common. Typically, white light is associated with the sort of divine creative, and also gold. Gold is associated with that, but that's a little bit different. So, but yeah, it was a very powerful experience in the sense that I realized a couple of things. First of all, you don't have to be in a particular state to astral project. That belief is a limitation. You don't have to be asleep. I was actually awake. And how I know I was awake is because I shifted my attention back to my physical body, and I could move my hands and legs and think with my mind and then go back. So there was no limitation there. Whereas if you fall asleep and then astral project, your awareness of your body is gone, which maybe is useful when it comes to some things. But it's not necessary. You can project while fully awake, and I've done it several times. So, yeah. So I guess if I was to say to someone what they should do to astral project, because I know that's what everyone cares about. First thing I would say is, if you have a really strong feeling about it, like you really care about it, like it's very important to you, you'll probably fail. And the reason I say you'll fail is because that strong desire is in of itself a form of attachment that your ego has integrated to an idea of who you should be. You should be a person who can, go out of body and travel the spiritual world. But that in itself is a sort of egotistical thing, in the sense that it's a trick. It's a very clever trick that the ego pulls, where it starts associating people's identity with their capability and makes this illusion that there's some sort of level. Like if you level up as a person, you gain new abilities. And this is not exactly true. It really is just whether or not you not even put the effort in. It's whether or not you are in a state where you have access to your divinity as a soul. If you're in a state where your mind is obsessed with the physical world, and you're very attached to it, and you experience fear and anxiety about it, you're not going to succeed. Sorry. You may succeed through sleep paralysis, though, in that state. But that won't be because of some gained ability. That will be because of some event that has affected you, has put you in that state in which you're forced to confront the spiritual dimension. And that's sort of a complicated subject. And once again, keep in mind, okay, firstly, these are my opinions from my experience. You should not treat them as law. And secondly, there are always exceptions to the rule. There are always people who are a bit different. And definitions are bad, meaning I can talk about anxiety and you can hear it and not understand what I'm saying because your experience is different. So how you interpret a word is different. So me communicating to you, I'm really trying, but there's some things that are very hard to get across. So what I would say is the intention is most important. To be in a state where you're not dominated by impulses. To be in a state where you are at peace and where you trust the world around you and where you're willing to trust it. If you're not willing to trust it, then any little sound will cause you to jump and become paranoid. Because you're entering, an altered state, which is vulnerable. The intention is most important, and the shift in your awareness is important. But in order to recognize that it's shifted, you have to be someone who spends time paying close attention to what that means. This is why meditation is always said to be important in astral projection. As far as anxiety and intrusive thoughts, I know a couple of ways to deal with them. You can quite literally imagine pulling them out of your head and throwing them, for instance. You can imagine lighting them on fire. Or, my new favorite way is you lay down and you take 2 fingers and you jab yourself in the shoulder muscle. Strong enough to elicit, a not a painful feeling, but a very persistent feeling that will catch your mind's attention. So you focus on that. And then while you're doing that, you think of the intrusive thought that's bothering you. And as you continue to jab yourself in different places, in your shoulder muscle and back muscle and neck, the thought loses its power. So it's sort of a combination of meditation, energy work, and recapturing your focus through the physical body, which is, I think, important. As far as getting out of body, if I was to give someone a step-by-step guide, it pretty much involves you need to be in a state where you don't have anything that is occupying your mind, and you need to let your thoughts wander without trying to control them. And as you enter a more relaxed state and you're observing your thoughts, you'll often find yourself entering into a sort of waking dream, where for a moment you're dreaming and then you're awake again. And you want to play with this state, meaning you want to be able to pull yourself out of it and go back into it with will and not overthink it, to do it by feeling instead of by thought. Because if you start overthinking it, you'll lose that state of mind, that relaxed state. You'll go into more of an alert state or a thoughtful state, and both are not going to help you. And then while you're in this in-between where the dream is coming and going and your thoughts are there and it's easy and things are flowing, that's when you want to set your intention on entering the spiritual world and leaving the body as a spirit. But keep in mind, these are just words. They're not going to equate to what really happens. Because there's a wide variety of what happens, and there's many layers. When I walked through heaven, I counted 11 layers as I went up, and I became more progressively blind. After the 3rd level, I couldn't see anything, and it was very hard after I came back to remember the first 3. But I do remember, I think the first level was a flat. I want to say that it was like a white plane, like what you would generically think of as heaven with not clouds. There was a floor. But anyways, as I went up, there was a green layer that was exceptionally complex with many machinery. Not machinery like we would recognize, but there was definitely a structural, almost city-like pattern, but none that you would recognize as human. And as I went up, and I believe there's also a red layer somewhere in there too. I don't remember that one very well. I just remember the green one pretty well. The memories really faded after that. And of course I went blind until at the 11th layer, even though I felt like I could continue to go up. And there was a definite shift in energy for each layer, so I could count them easily. It was just a white void at the top. And that's reported. I've heard a few people talk about that. So that's not unique to me. I didn't know it at the time, though. But there's also heavenly realms, so not necessarily the objective heavens. The objective heavens are, you don't recognize them as human construction. They're a bit odd. But the realms, they're definitely, it's like, oh, that's a building from the 6th century. It's like, I know when that heaven was built, you know. Anyways, I keep getting distracted because it's very easy to. What I'm basically saying is, no words that are spoken are going to tell you how the thing is, because the thing is always greater than its words used to describe it. We always compress things so that it can be communicated. So I couldn't tell you anything. And there's some things that are like, you know, some people say like beyond words or something like that, but it's mostly just like, there's some things that just, it's not sufficient to talk about them. And you know that if you tell someone, they won't understand it. So you'll just be giving them the impression that they know when they don't. So it would just be frustrating. But anyways, I think that's probably where I'm going to end it. This is just a little bit of haphazard advice as to what to do when it comes to astral projection and some of my own experience. My opinion is that if you want a thing and you're honest to yourself about that and you prioritize it, it will happen. But if it's not a priority for you, it won't.